Welcome /malicious compliance. Company travel, always a rich vein for this sub. Reading some of the submissions here of late reminded me of a company I worked for around 10 years ago. I was in it tech. This company had factories in 3 corners of the UK, Southampton, Newcastle upon Tyne and Belfast, as well as more factories and offices around the globe. Being the base in Southampton, we'd quite regularly have to fly up to Newcastle, or over to Belfast to fix an issue, or just for routine maintenance on their kit. Often the higher up managers would be making the same journeys, so we'd arrange with their PA to share the taxi from the office to the airport, make sure we are on the same flight, then share the taxi at the other end to the factory there. These were executive taxis, long wheelbase BMW 7 Series and Merc S-Class usually. At the destination there'd be a man with a little sign for the exec who grab his/her bags and take us to the car. All very nice. If the visit required an overpass stay, they'd put us up in the same 4-star hotel as the execs as it was near the factory, on an industrial estate, and again, we could share taxes. This was a pretty sweet and sensible deal, until the company was owned by a larger group, who decided on a top-down edict that all job grades below exec level didn't get business class travel, didn't get exec taxes. Number 4-star hotels. We could also only eat at the hotel's restaurant, unless we were entertaining guests from another company. Obviously this was going to affect us as an IT team, so we tried to push back on it. Not happening. You have to follow the letter of the law. The PAs, we had one for it as well as the couple who worked for the execs, got their heads together and came up with the plan. First thing was, our flights had to change. We were previously using an airline which operated small aircraft in a business class only configuration. They left Southampton at around 8 AM, meaning we'd arrive in Newcastle ready to start the day's work. The return flight departed at 18:30ish, meaning we could leave at 5 and get home in time for dinner. The only other option was a commercial airline. This flight left mid-morning, and because it wasn't business class, it took longer to get through security etc, meaning we had to present at the airport at 9ish for the 11:15 flight, not arriving in Newcastle until lunchtime. Wasted half a day working right there. Rather than sharing the executive taxi to the airport, with which we had an account, we were stand on the street and hail a hackney, which turned out to cost nearly twice the pre-booked exec option. The return flight departed at 15:30, so unless you only had an hour's work to do, you had to now stay the night somewhere. We were only allowed to book from one of 2 chains, Premier Inn and Travelodge. Turns out the Premier Inn in the middle of Newcastle costs more than the 4-star place out on the industrial estate. Plus now I've got places to go out, and a much longer taxi ride from the office. As anyone who's stayed in one knows, these chain hotels have generally crap, but hugely overpriced restaurants. I can see cheap options which I'd be fine with like Nando's or Zizzy from my room, but no, I have to go to the on-site restaurant and order a £25 steak. My favorite trip was one where I had to take a new server up there. The company wouldn't pay for it to be couriered as it was too heavy. They wouldn't pay for the baggage allowance. Policy was only cabin baggage on the commercial flights. They would have taken it no probs on the other airline. So I had to drive. Company standard was to pay 45p a mile for the first 10,000 business miles in a tax year. I'd recently bought a cheap diesel that would do 70 plus mpg if I kept it below 60 miles per hour. And as I'd be driving on company time, why not? 350 miles each way cost me a little over £50 on diesel at that time, and I got paid £315 in expenses for doing it. The airfare on the business class jet would have been around £250 return. Our departmental PA worked out that travel as a whole was now costing the adept roughly 3 times what it used to under the old system, and that's not counting the missed hours when we could have been working. Of course nothing ever came of it, because the people who make these decisions never bother looking into the impact of them, or probably never even get a report that would highlight it. From our point of view it meant a problem that could be sorted in a single day now took at least 2, and we were away from the office a lot more. I visited my mother one day and she was watching one of those shows where they try to intervene into someone's life and get them help for some issue they have. In this particular instance, the lady was spending tons and tons of money every month, as in racking up thousands of dollars on her credit cards every month and not paying them because she didn't make anywhere near as much as she was spending. She spent a year just constantly opening up new cards and not paying the old ones until the old ones went into collections and started coming after her in court. But one aspect of this thing stuck with me, and that's why I mentioned it in reply to your comment. They tried to get her on a meal budget where she would spend about $5 for breakfast, $5 to $10 for lunch, and then $5 to $10 for dinner, just for herself to eat. When this lady heard that she can only spend $5 for lunch, she blew a gasket, and I quote, "How the hell can anyone survive spending less than $200 for lunch? I don't know what the F is wrong with some people like this. Even if you had the money, how the F are you spending $200 for lunch every day and think it's normal?" American interstate highways are mostly straight lines with uniform speed limits, much like British motorways, but to say that there are no windy, variable, and congested roads in America is patently false. Unless you're going from one large metropolitan area to another, chances are high you're gonna end up on some shitty winding 2-lane roads in the middle of nowhere. West Virginia has entered the chat. Anytime we travel, we usually are going to the beach, so it's a bit of a drive from Ohio to say Florida or North Carolina. I can say without a doubt I absolutely detest driving through West Virginia. Half the roads were washed out, and 2-lane roads on a mountain were cut to 1 lane on a fucking mountain. The image of a semi barreling through a 1 lane with some caution tape and a cone taking out my family was a frequent fear. Yup. Our motorways were once highways, were once farm tracks. We have a lot of stuff to drive around, whereas my perception is America had somewhat of a blank canvas when deciding where to put roads, so they are pretty straight/direct. Newcastle to Southampton is about 5.5 hours to drive, without stops. So in reality you're looking a 6.5 hour journey. Flying would take time too, but if you're domestic and executive, probably 3 hours from arriving at SDHPN airport to leaving Nuke airport. Plus less chance of getting delayed by traffic or accidents. Flying would definitely be preferred way to travel, especially if you get the executive perks. Edit Mr. Space. Yeah, I fly for 350 miles. I used to fly that distance a few times a week, even. If you're a frequent flyer, especially with pre-check, getting checked in and screened is often a 5-minute process. Coming from SoCal, if I have a meeting in SF, I can take a 65-minute flight there in the morning, spend a few hours doing whatever I'm there for, and be back home before most people are done with their 9-5s. Same deal goes for Vegas. Driving means that will be a 2-day trip, most of which must be spent paying attention to the road instead of something more productive. One day at an old job I got called up to fix a phone for a consultant microbiologist in the UK, probably £85,000/year. Someone had pinched the adapter dongle for the wall plug, which takes an old school British phone jack to an Ethernet plug. One of our secretaries, £25,000/year, had already spent 20 minutes with the microbiologist looking for another adapter. They called me, £25,000/year, to help out. After another half hour I managed to borrow one from another department. Given how much all that faff cost us, public sector, I am an Aldarid manager, £45,000/year, to get hold of another couple of adapters in case we needed them again. He said I'd have to get in touch with the office manager, £35,000/year, to order them. I looked on eBay and found the things we needed, which were about £3 each. I emailed the office manager with a link to the eBay listing and a specification for the pinout of the plugs at each end, then went on leave for a week. When I came back, I found myself CC'd into a chain of emails. The office manager asking her assistant, £20,000/year, to ask the ad purchasing dep to order the item. The office manager's assistant asking the ad purchasing assistant, $20,000/year, to order the item. The ad purchasing assistant asking the ad purchasing manager, £40,000/year, whether it was an item they could already supply. The IT purchasing manager asking the office manager's assistant if they were sure that was what they wanted, as they weren't sure it was a thing that existed. The office manager's assistant saying I was on leave and she didn't know, and my exact pinout and eBay link was all she had. The IT purchasing manager asking the IT network manager, £40,000/year, whether this was something they could make. The IT network manager asking the IT purchasing manager why we would want such a thing. The IT purchasing manager forwarding the rest of the email chain to the IT network manager, and the IT network manager replying, no, we can neither make nor purchase that item. We never did get any more, but fortunately I left the useless bastards before we needed another. I had a similar experience. We used to be able to stay at the logical hotels and we would expense reasonable meals. We got a directive to follow the guidelines to control costs. The hotels were never close and cost way more. We started expensing every meal to the full amount and our flights ended costing a fortune in lost efficiency and having to rebook constantly as the cheaper airlines are unreliable. Things returned to some normalcy just before all travel was banned. It is yet to be seen what will happen. I still have thousands in airfare credits from all the cancelled flights. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed the video, hit like. If you would like to see more, feel free to subscribe.